Hey, I'm Alicia Newcomb, and this is Assembly Guide, your guide to assembling and organizing as we work to make change in our theatrical industry. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Assembly Guide. Thank you so much for joining again. I can't wait to talk to you today. So, you want Actors Equity Association to function for you, but you don't have a super high level of time or energy to invest for whatever reason, be that you're working a contract, you have other commitments, you can't or don't want to choose at this moment to invest time or energy with equity. This episode is for you. I promised an episode with the lens of, I'm working on an Actors Equity Association contract. I don't really want to get involved directly, but what are the basic things I should be doing? With that, and with the direct example of the winter storm and state of emergency the weekend of January 25th, 2026, through which the Broadway League insisted that most shows continue in New York City, I created this episode to give you 2 low commitment, easy to engage with action steps that you can do as an Actors Equity Association member working any contract to help the union better function for the changes that you want to see. Speaking only ever on my own behalf and not in any way as a representative of the union. I am not a representative of the union, nor do I speak for the union in any way. I'm Alicia Newcomb, she, her, and this is Assembly Guide, your guide to assembling and organizing as we work to make change in our theatrical industry. To those who are new here, the goal of this podcast, and any reels that I make, is to lower the barriers to self-advocacy, to point us towards each other and towards action steps to actually create the changes that we want to see toward a better, safer, more humane theatrical industry. Before we jump into these 2 action steps, I'm going to preface all of this with the very most important thing that you can do, which is to understand the actual legal capabilities of the union, understand who is actually at fault and leading the charge in pushing back on all the changes that we want to see towards better protection for workers and more humane theatrical spaces. Spoiler alert, it's not Actors Equity Association, it's the employers on all of our contracts. And understand in reality what actions are going to help achieve the changes that we claim to champion and what actions are actually making it harder for all of us to get those changes in future. It absolutely sucks when you're in a situation that is unsafe and there aren't contract provisions to protect you. That's why I got actively involved in advocating within Actors Equity Association, just as a member. Your feelings are valid, absolutely valid. If we want to make change in any system, we have to understand how it operates. We have to understand in reality and legally when we're dealing with contracts, who has the ability to create new rules, who can enforce those rules, and who holds the decision-making power when things go beyond the scope of the protections in the contracts. I'm a visual learner, so here's a visual concept to think of. Think of a contract like a seesaw. Everything in a contract, so any of Actors Equity Association's contracts, and every single union job has a specific contract, and there are many different kinds. Everything in a contract has to be negotiated and agreed upon by both sides of the contract. So, the union and the employer have to agree upon literally every single thing in a contract, or what we call a CBA, a collective bargaining agreement. No one, not the employer, not the union, gets to single-handedly mandate anything. It's a legal negotiation process which has its own rules and laws. This isn't about negotiations, so I'll skip that all for now, but every single thing is agreed upon, and that's the contract. The contract is this seesaw in our imaginations right now. Now, visualize the employers on one side of the seesaw and the union on the other. A union can only enforce the requirements of a contract, of the CBA. They cannot require employers to do more than they agreed to in a contract. But it also goes the other way. The employers cannot do less than they agreed to within a contract. So when the seesaw tips because the employers aren't following the agreed upon rules of the CBA, the union has the power and the responsibility to say, hey, that's not what we agreed upon, and to resolve the issue. which honestly, this shouldn't happen in the first place because employers agreed to these rules. But unfortunately, they do try to snake in and out of them in whatever ways they can, which is sometimes why it's essential to have super clear rules. But also in some cases, it's actually more beneficial to have more ambiguity in the rules because it allows the union stronger enforcement flexibility in certain cases and a stronger ability to protect members. Because the union can't anticipate every single situation in every single production for every single rule. Ask staff if you have questions about this. The concept of ambiguity in rules was really strange to me when I first started tuning in. It very much makes sense when you talk to staff. Sometimes there's a need for clarity. Sometimes there's a need for a little bit more flexibility and ambiguity. But when the employer is not following the agreed upon rules, that's when the union has the power. When the employers are doing less than those agreed upon rules. But the seesaw can unfortunately tip the other way as well. When something happens that the CBA doesn't fully protect us against yet, as the workers, the decision-making power lies with the employer because they're just that, the employer. So, for example, I personally think we should never do more than 8 shows in a row before a required day off. It breaks people's voices, it breaks people's bodies, it makes people sick and injured and not able to do their show safely and sustainably. But the CBA for the production contract, one of many among Actors Equity Association contracts, allows up to 16 performances in a row still before a required day off, even though the number of times that can happen was lowered in the last production contract negotiations, which is a necessary step towards achieving the eventual change we need in future. Even if I think it's dangerous to do 16 shows in a row, which it is, and I do, as angry as I am about it, the decision to do 16 shows in a row, or the decision to do the humane thing and only schedule 8 shows in a row max, lies with the employer. The union in that case cannot say, hey, this is unsafe and you can't do this. It's unfortunately allowed within the contract. So, knowing that the union only has the ability to enforce the contract, not to require the employer to go above and beyond the contract and just do the right thing, making change means knowing where to point the frustrations now that we know who has the power and where to focus our energy for changing those things. And when we focus that energy correctly, we, the union, the workers, will have immensely more power. If we want to actually see the change we're talking about, we have to make sure that our energy, our anger, our frustration, our words and actions are making it more likely for us to achieve that change, not less likely. And when we spend energy pointing at the union for things beyond its scope of power, like enforcing things that go above and beyond contract rules, we're not only incorrect about who has the ability to change things, we're also weakening the union, perpetuating the false notion that our union doesn't work effectively and therefore continuing to add to the ripples that weaken the union in the long run, and making it easier for the employers, the Broadway League in the case of the production contract, but each contract has its own set of employers. We're allowing those employers to get away with not having to agree to the protections that we deserve because public opinion is we're never going to get these changes because our union doesn't fight for us. This is incorrect, and it's part of the problem. Our frustrations about not having the protections we deserve are all so valid, so valid. You should be safe and protected in your workspaces and treated with humanity. If we want those changes, we have to, at the cost of taking just a second to process our frustrations and lean in and learn, think about whether or not we're actually helping or hurting in the eventual achievement of that change. Public pressure absolutely has its place, although research does prove that we cannot fight dehumanization with tools of dehumanization, and if we claim to champion humanity, we have to practice that always in our own communication. But we have to ensure that we, the workers, remember that the fault of not having the protections we deserve, which we don't, the fault of being put in unsafe working conditions is because the employers, the Broadway League in this case, but the employers in whatever case, continue to refuse to agree to those protections. even fighting actively against them behind bargaining tables, and they continue to make decisions that jeopardize our health, well-being, and safety. Now, in any situation that's a show-related emergency or safety issue, you should absolutely call the emergency lines. Call Actors Equity Association emergency line. And if you have issues with it, I also hear that. I've called the safety line many times. I've been a deputy before. If you have issues with it, please let Actors Equity Association staff know, especially if you have issues with it, because those need to get resolved so that can be a helpful resource in future. And email the head of member safety for Actors Equity Association, whose name is Keith Sklar. Keith is wonderful. Shout out to Keith. I've worked with Keith many times. Keith is awesome. And his team really cares about making sure you're safe in your workspaces. So please, please, please email him. Any Actors Equity Association email, just so we all know, is first initial, last name at actorsequity.org. Email Keith Sklar, head of member safety, and a safety field rep. I'd also recommend talking to your company manager and your stage manager in the moment if it's a production-related safety issue. So if you're on stage and something happens and you're immediately unsafe, please, please, please tell a stage manager. If you don't think that the union's fighting hard enough, please keep tuning into Union Spaces, vote in Actors Equity Association elections, and stay tuned. Because now I'm getting to those 2 action steps that you can take to ensure your union is working for you, whether you're working a production contract or any contract under Actors Equity Association. Prefacing these 2 action steps with talking about the winter storm, the weekend of January 25th, 2026. Now that we know who has the decision-making power when it exceeds the protections of the contract, the employers, if you're in a situation where you're unsafe, and the contract provisions aren't sufficient enough to protect you, which we all saw with the storm, it's especially vital to follow these steps and to report and log all these things so that they can change. Reporting and logging these things, both individually and by reporting to our union, and understanding who has the decision-making power, again, and who is actively putting you in that situation, the employers. But reporting these things and logging them and talking to the union gives the union the strength and power that it needs in future versus undermining them when we misunderstand who's at fault for this, so that they can make that fight successfully in future at the bargaining tables to get the contract protections that we need. Here are the 2 action steps that you can and should be doing if you're working any Actors Equity Association contract to make sure that the union is working on behalf of you. Number 1, report to business reps. Staff at Actors Equity Association, which includes business reps and field reps, staff can only enforce contracts, but they can also answer questions, log data, keep track of what members are telling them, and they do all of those things. And the input that they're receiving actually fuels negotiations because the member priorities and the member concerns that are communicated to them, they log and track, and then they discuss not only with the people who lead negotiating teams, but members of those negotiating teams and committees, etc., as proposals are being built, as proposal packages are being organized and prioritized as those teams are in bargaining. Why is reporting to business reps important? Knowing that the union can only enforce contracts, we have to strengthen those contracts. Reporting indicates member priorities and member concerns to staff, who then share this information with bargaining teams, committees, the leaders of bargaining teams, all of the above. This also helps build data for arguments at the actual bargaining tables. Having been someone who was on a bargaining team, sitting across the table from the Broadway League, I can tell you, we did not have some of the data that we need to make our points. We did, but we didn't have enough of it. And I'm not going to deal with why we don't have enough. I'm going to deal with how we build enough data in future. And it's by all of us actively communicating with our union, with our business reps. So reporting to business reps builds data for arguments at the table. Reporting and logging the data and people's experiences that they're communicating with the union and the issues that they're running into and how their company is handling those things and all of the above gives the union the strength and the power that it needs to make those fights in future. So for example, let's talk about the storm. If we want protections where, for example, in cases of weather emergencies, in case of declared state of emergencies in New York, productions are required to be canceled in future as opposed to leaving it up to the employers to decide to do the right thing, which we clearly saw they did not do. If we want that change, and our union is fighting for that at the bargaining table, hypothetical situation here. Imagine no one reports, no one makes contact with the union to share what happened at their show. In 3 years at the bargaining table for the production contract, we'll either have a case where people can say, hey, remember, everyone in the union was upset about this, and the employers go, oh, really? Do you have data? And we go, no, but we were told that everyone was upset about it. Like, that's one situation. Or we say, hey, everyone in the union was upset about this. And they say, oh, yeah? Are you sure? And we say, yes. In fact, this many hundred of people who were working your shows that day said they were actively put in unsafe situations. And here's how. This person said XYZ. This anonymous person said XYZ. We have the data that we need, but it involves us communicating with our business reps. So situation A or situation B? Situation B, with all the data and the input from members, is going to put our union in a significantly stronger place to fight that fight at the bargaining table. And this is true for any issue that we want to see change. So, what do I report to business reps? Report things that you think are rule breaks. For emergencies, remember, please contact the emergency line and the safety contacts at Actors Equity Association and report any issues that you have with the emergency line so that those can be fixed. You should report rule breaks. You should report things that you don't like about the contract or that you think should change, even if they're allowed. And again, remember that staff has no power to change those things before we are able to achieve contract changes in future. That's essential to remember. And you should report data. To understand what's helpful data, you kind of need to understand where the contract currently is. But as a first step, try thinking of what you want to see change. Like, imagine you're a lawyer. Think of what you want to see change and think of what data would be helpful to make that case, to make that argument yourself. Those are the types of things to be reporting. Speaking off the top of my mind, for data needs for collection for future bargaining sessions, we need swing data, split tracks. So report when you're doing split tracks, how many tracks you're doing. Report when someone's on vacation and the company does not bring a swing in to cover that track for the entirety of the vacation. They should be doing that. Report that. Report when you're having rehearsals and stretches of more than 10 shows in a row. Those rehearsals are now restricted per the achievements we got in the last cycle. Even report if you're doing more than 8 shows and you're having rehearsals. Report that. Report when you're doing more than 8 consecutive shows in a row. Report the times that you're asked to adjust things on stage if you're not a swing. Report inadequate or insufficient PT, either in quantity or quality, whether or not a PT is a good fit for your company, whether you have enough slots to get the care that you need. You should be able to get that through work. Report those things. Report if you're working with too many PTs in rotation. Report if the time slots are weird for PT. Report if you have extra shows beyond 8 in a row with no extra PT provided by your company. Report all these things. Like, be creative. Think of the fight that you're wanting to make and what would help make that case. Report those things. Talking about the store, data that helps fight for contract changes is what we need. So we're not making things up. Data needs to be truthful. It needs to be your actual experience at your show and what was done. But narrative data about your experience, for example, if you felt unsafe going to work and you told your company and they didn't do anything about it, or they penalized you for not being able to make it to work, those are all helpful experiences to share with business reps and to report. Regarding the storm, information that's also helpful is, did you have to split track because there weren't enough people at your show? If your show was canceled and when it was canceled, were you already at work and then it was canceled? And why was it canceled? Was it canceled because your show didn't have enough coverage to actually make the show run? Was housing and or transportation provided to only select people in your company, for example, principals, and the ensemble was left to fend for themselves? Did you communicate safety concerns to your company and how did they respond? All these things should be reported to Actors Equity Association, and business reps are the people to report that to. So I'm hoping that we understand now why reporting to business reps is essential and absolutely important. Super, super, super important. If you want to find your contact for who your personal business rep is, you can ask your deputy who your business rep is. They should know. You can also, on the member portal, if you want to do it yourself, log in, scroll all the way down to the bottom, and in the footer, there's a section where you can click Contact Us. When you click Contact Us, it'll pull up a new page. And at the top of that page, if you're on your phone, or the left side of that page, if you're on your computer, there will be a box that says Find Your Rep. Click See More. I'm literally doing it right now on my computer as I talk to you. At the top of the page, it'll say Your Current Business Rep. You can click View Now, and it will take you to a page where you will be able to see the contract that you're currently working and any other contract you've worked and the business rep for those contracts. You can also search the contact information of business reps and field reps in general from this page by clicking business representatives or field representative. Business representative singular. And then there's a filter where you can look on the filter for what contract you're working, and it will pull up those business reps or those field reps. But hopefully we now understand why we have to be reporting to our business reps, what type of information is helpful to be reporting to our business reps. Doesn't have to be a super long email. You can email your business rep and say, hey, can you please give me a call? I had a situation I'd love to discuss with you. It might take a second because they have different shows that they represent, but absolutely please reach out, contact your business reps. That's how we make sure that our business reps understand what's important to us, the issues that we're facing, and what we want the union to focus on for changes moving forward. Step number 2, super easy step number 2, fill out surveys. Surveys are sent to you for any contract that you have worked at a certain point in time to help get member perspective as to what your experience was working that contract and what you want to see change. Any input that you put on these surveys is made totally anonymous. The surveys go to staff who make the information anonymous. They take out references to shows, etc. So no one's going to be able to identify who you are. But that member input, all of it is taken and read by staff, read by the leaders and the members of bargaining teams. And it is used to fuel bargaining package prioritization for bargaining teams as they go to the table. Just remember, all Actors Equity Association contracts go through bargaining. It is super important that we're filling out these surveys. And yes, if we're filling out the surveys the way that we need to be, it's gonna take some time. But when you sit down and you figure out, okay, 30 minutes of my day now filling out the survey or however long it's going to take you personally, is that worth actually achieving the contract changes you want to see in future? To me, it is. Sit down, fill those out, take your time, be thorough, and fill out any and all open-ended responses if you have things that you want to say. Because checking the boxes only allows you to check predetermined things. So if there's things on there that aren't as detailed as you want them to be, aren't as focused as you want them to be, aren't reflective of the changes you want to see, it's super crucial that you're filling out the open-ended responses and putting in all the information about everything that you want to see change. Share your input. Here's a bonus step. Something extra that you can do is know the committees that govern the work that you do and start to tune into those spaces. So, there's gonna be more than one committee within Actors Equity Association that applies to the work that you do. They're divided by things like contract type. For example, production committee, LORT committee, off-Broadway committee, touring committee, etc. And they're also divided by the type of work that we do. There's a principal committee. There's a stage manager committee. There's the ACCA, which is the chorus committee. There's an actor instrumentalist committee. So, more than one committee is going to affect the work that you do. Think about the contract you're working. Think about the type of work you do. Why should you know the committees that govern your work? The contract committees specifically. The chairs of those committees who are elected counselors, which is why it's important we vote in equity elections. Those chairs of those committees choose the bargaining team members. Those members have to be approved by council or the applicable governing board, but those chairs choose those members and they lead those bargaining teams with oversight from staff and the executive team at Actors Equity. Therefore, these chairs and the people on those bargaining teams are leading the charge for changing contract protections in future. So, if you understand the committees that govern the work that you do, you should be tuning into those spaces. Go to those meetings. Are they discussing the things that are actually of concern to you? Honestly, if not, you're not engaged enough with your union. I've made a previous reel about how to tune into committee spaces. Check that out if that's of interest to you. But if you're not engaging enough with your union, the great 2 first steps to get involved are talk to your business reps, fill out your surveys. So if you're tuning into these committee spaces, like an extra bonus step is you can report to the chairs of those committees. Remember, please, those are elected representatives. They're doing this work entirely volunteer, entirely for free. They're also actors and stage managers. Keep that in mind. Also, FYI, members of committees can be elected representatives, but they can also be just totally volunteer actors or stage managers. I myself am on the production committee. But all these people on committees, all this work is not paid. It's totally volunteer. You can join. See my reel titled 101 to Engaging with Actors Equity Association for information on how to join a committee. But if you're reporting to your chairs, like always CC a business rep and CC a field rep if it's safety related. Let's talk specifically about the storm. Tying this information together, regarding the winter storm, I created an email template that was widely shared on social media to help incentivize this action step of people connecting to their union and to hopefully make that feel more accessible. But we can all do this for any contract change that we want to see. The storm specifically was an example of a safety emergency issue. So any emails should have also had the safety field rep for the contract or the head of member safety, Keith Sklar, CC'd on those emails, which was something I was a little late to the game to add to that template, but I did eventually. And anyone who was experiencing a safety issue should have called the emergency line. A bonus step that I created for that email template specifically was that people should add committee chairs to those emails. So I included the contacts of the 3 tri-chairs of the production committee. Some committees have more than 1 chair. Production committee has 3. Ann McPherson, Jacqueline Gerald, and Kristen Beth Williams. They're incredible. But I added their emails so people could CC the 3 chairs of the production committee, who are, remember, elected leaders and also volunteers who actually do this work as well. They don't have to do anything about it. But because the tri-chairs are awesome and care very deeply about us getting the protections that we need in future and strengthening our union, they all showed up and they worked and emailed a response, which is more than I've seen from some elected leaders in past in our union. And they publicly on their social media and by contacting people and trying to get the message out there, invited anyone to attend the production committee meeting that's upcoming. They're also going to have production committee meetings happening more regularly than is even required by the production committee because they care about making it a functional space. So if you used my email template, yay, thank you so much. I'm glad it felt accessible. Way to go. We connected to our union. Let's lean in even more, attend the production committee meeting, and be in the spaces that are talking about the work that you're doing on the daily. To recap, the most important thing you can do as a member working a contract to make sure the union is functioning for you, in my opinion, the most important thing of all, always understand who has the power and the ability to change things in any given situation. This requires pausing and leaning in a little and making sure that our outrage, our words, and our actions contribute to fixing that thing in future and not making it harder, even if unintentionally. That's the overarching If you do anything, please do this. The 2 easy action steps that anyone working in Actors Equity Association contracts should be doing to make sure the union functions for you are report to business reps and fill out surveys, with the bonus of paying attention to the committees that affect the work that you do and tuning into those spaces. To help us process this, I always appreciate an example. It helps me understand. So here's a hypothetical example for processing and understanding. Personally, I think more than 8 shows in a row should never be allowed. More than 8 in a row breaks our voices, breaks our bodies, puts us in danger. Not okay. So thinking about the lens of who has the decision-making power, I talk to staff and I ask them, or I read what the contract says, and I learn contractually that in the production contract, 1 to 12 shows in a row can happen an unlimited number of times a year, and 13 to 16 shows in a row can happen 4 times per year, except within this first 6 months of a production. There's a few exceptions there. So I learned that information, and now I understand what the contract says. I also know that the union can only enforce the contract. So thinking about what I want to see change, and knowing that the union can't enforce beyond that, and that the Broadway League on the production contract are the ones who refuse to agree to tighter restrictions on that, know who has the decision-making power and who's on the other side of your contract. Here's what I'm going to do. Knowing what I know, knowing who has the decision-making power, and knowing that if I want this to change, it's got to be a contract change in future. I'm going to take my 2 steps into action. 1, report to business reps. I'm going to report any data that I think will be helpful around the thing I want to see change. So, knowing I want no more than 8 shows in a row between days off, I'm going to report any time that my show does more than 8 shows, even though that's contractually allowed. Every single time that happens, I'm going to email my business reps and report that. I'm going to report in those stretches if there were things like split tracks. If my show didn't have enough swing coverage anytime we had more than 8 shows in a row. If all swings were on stage and we didn't have another swing in the building for any specific people, if people were left uncovered, I'm reporting that. I'm also reporting if we had press events or rehearsals during any stretch where we had more than 8 shows in a row. Again, that's allowed some of those times. I'm reporting that anytime it's happening, because those are the things that I think my union needs to make that argument. So the union can say, look how many times this show did more than 8 shows in a row. Look how many times this show scheduled rehearsals even when they had more than 8 shows in a row. Look how many times this show didn't have adequate coverage when it did more than 8 shows in a row. That's what I'm reporting. Step number 2, filling out surveys. On my survey, when it's time, I'm going to write this everywhere, along with everything else that I want to see change. I'm going to write, there should never be more than 8 shows in a row between days off, period. And I'm going to write it everywhere. I'm going to be super clear about what I want to see. I'm going to say this should never even be allowed during holiday times. There should be no exceptions to this rule, period. And with the bonus of knowing what committees affect my work, I'm going to think about the work I do. Most recently worked a production contract, and I typically do ensemble work. So the committees that affect me are the production committee and the ACCA, the chorus committee. Knowing those 2 committees affect my work, I'm going to reach out to those chairs or email governance@actorsequity.org and ask when those meetings are happening. And I'm going to request to zoom into those meetings to observe. See if the people in those spaces are talking about the change that you want to see. If not, keep leaning in and keep talking to your union about it. In conclusion, our feelings are so very valid. Our employers should not be able to create working conditions that actively put us in danger and hurt our voices and bodies. It's a business, folks. We're fighting capitalism and a government, especially right now, that does not protect or value workers and their safety and well-being and humanity. This is a huge fight all over our country, all over our world. I hate that our employers can put us in situations like this. It's not okay. It's why I got involved in Actors Equity Association, in helping people connect to Actors Equity Association and to actions that are going to help us to change it. Slowly but surely. We are capable of creating that change. But if we want it, we have to lean in and make sure we're being a part of the solution, not perpetuating the status quo and continuing the cycle of weakening the union and therefore allowing employers to get away with continually hurting and mistreating their employees. So I hope you'll lean in, think about who's got the power in the situation you're trying to change, direct frustrations appropriately, and then lean into actions of how you can be a part of changing it. If you're working contracts, report to your business reps, fill out those surveys. For more, if you want to get even more involved with Actors Equity Association, check out my last episode, a 101 to getting involved with Actors Equity Association. And please keep tuning in for more conversations about how we create a safer, more humane theatrical industry. For more on all of this, check out my last episode, a 101 to getting involved with Actors Equity Association, and please keep tuning in for more conversations about how we create a safer, more humane theatrical industry. Check out Assembly Guide on Instagram and follow or subscribe for upcoming episodes. Do you have a topic in mind about creating more humane theatrical spaces you'd like to discuss or hear me talk about? Reach out to me directly at assemblyguidepodcast@gmail.com. I'd honestly love to hear from you. And if you've got someone in mind that you think I should connect with to celebrate and highlight the awesome work that they're doing to make our theater industry more humane, please let me know. Till next time, thanks for joining me on this journey towards change. Bye.